Hello and welcome to episode number 36 of the Bay to Bay podcast. I'm your host, Seb Frey, and for this episode of the podcast, I'm very excited to have Jeanne Radsick as my guest. Jeanne Radsick is the president-elect for the California Association of Realtors for 2020. So right now, there is a president of the California Association of Realtors. His name is Jared Martin. But in 2020, Jeanne Radsick will become the official president of the California Association of Realtors. Now, she is presently on the leadership team because president-elect is one of the key offices of the California Association of Realtors. But next year, 2020, she'll be stepping into the head role of the association. And that's pretty big shoes to fill. You know, there are over 200,000 members in the California Association of Realtors. It is a very large and influential trade organization. You know, California is the fifth largest economy in the world by GDP, not the fifth biggest state, the fifth biggest in the entire world. And real estate is a huge sector of the economy. So Jeanne is stepping into a very important role there at the Association of Realtors because we, as realtors, have a very big influence on the housing and real estate market in California. So I was very excited to have the opportunity to sit down with Jeanne and ask her a bunch of questions that I sort of have as a real estate practitioner and as a Californian about what's going on with real estate, housing in our area, what she views as important for real estate practitioners and the industry. It's a very interesting and kind of wide-ranging conversation. So without further ado, please sit back, relax, and listen to what Jeanne Radsick has to say. All right, Jeanne, how you doing?
I'm doing fine.
Thank you so much for coming down to Santa Cruz today. I really appreciate you showing up.
It is my pleasure. I've never been here before, so this was a nice opportunity.
And it's very unusual. It's raining today. You know, in January, you know, half the time it could be, 80 degrees and sunny, but now we're having a nice, proper, wet January.
Well, from where I'm from, the rain thinks about coming over the Kern County line, and then all of a sudden it says, oh, wait, this is Kern County. I don't rain here.
Right. Right. Well, that's good and bad. So, I like to open my podcasts by asking my guests to tell me a story. And do you have any kind of story you can share with our listeners here?
If you're okay, I'll share the story of one of my favorite buyer stories. And it goes back a long time. I was showing this gentleman homes. His wife did not speak any English, but he had been a custodian at a local high school for about 15 years. And this gentleman's brother was a realtor in town, but didn't want to make time to work with him. So I started taking him out and showing him houses. Now, his top purchase price was $35,000. So it didn't buy you a whole lot, certainly more than it would buy you in your area. But we found a house. He got into the house, and as we closed escrow, he wanted to know, would I come back for the house blessing when he got it all fixed up? I said, of course. A year later, I got a call from him. He said he had a priest coming that was going to do a house blessing, and would I come? And he said, and bring your whole family. And I said, well, wait. You know how many kids I have? And he said, no. I said, well, I have 7 kids. He said, oh, great, bring them all. Of course, my kids were less than thrilled to go. What I didn't understand till we got there is that we were the guests of honor. And they had this huge meal prepared, and they had mariachi singers, and it went until the wee hours of the morning. But he had the priest come in and do the blessing, first in Spanish, because most of the people were Spanish speaking, and then in English so that my family and I would understand what was being said. It was very, very special, very touching to know that we were actually the guests of honor.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, it was a great time. That
is great. Wow, and that's one of the best things about being a realtor, really, is being able to make a positive difference like that in people's lives.
And this man had totally rehabbed this house, had rearranged the rooms. I mean, it was just
right. It was a palace.
It was a 900 square foot palace for him. It was fabulous.
Right. Yeah. That's a great story. That's really a great story. And so, $35,000 house. Tell our listeners who may not be familiar, where was this? What?
This is in Bakersfield. That's where I live now.
Bakersfield. And where did you grow up?
In Riverside.
And
I was born and raised in Riverside.
And that is Southern California inland. Is that where that is?
That is correct.
That is correct. Okay. So what was your childhood like? Were you a large family or?
I was number 2 out of 5.
Okay. Medium.
And my dad was a city policeman. Didn't make a lot of money, so he had 2 part-time jobs on the side, one of which morphed into being a realtor.
Oh, really?
So
wow.
my dad was a realtor way back in the 60s.
Way back in the 60s, right on. So what was your childhood like with your dad working so much and being a realtor? Did you get dragged around to open houses or had to knock on doors? Or
No, but I did put his MLS book together. They had little printouts and they had clip books, and so you would take out the old listings and put in the new listings every week. I'd help do that.
Those were the good old days, right?
Little different than doing it on your phone. Oh wait, they didn't have phones. Oh,
right. So I've never actually been to Riverside. Is it like a big city or is it like a small town? Or at that time was it a big city?
It's a big city now, but back then, I mean, I was within the end of the block. There was an orange grove,
right?
And so as a child growing up, we lived nearby in the lower section to a country club that had a huge, deep arroyo. Well, my parents never knew that we would take our tricycles, stand on the back, and freewheel all the way down that arroyo. No one would possibly see you if they came with a car before they topped it and went down.
Right.
We didn't see that as a danger. You know, we were just dumb little kids, had a great time.
Right. Those were the good old days. Yes, I remember those days. I never had an arroyo like that, but we certainly did ride our bicycles, far over the horizon.
Everywhere.
Where nobody would ever know where we were. So how long did you live in Riverside? Were you there till you went to college, or?
I went to college there. University of California, Riverside.
UC Riverside.
Yeah.
Oh, right on.
And we moved to Bakersfield back in '86. And so that was, actually, I lived in Redlands prior to moving to Bakersfield, and we moved for my husband's job.
Okay. But what did you study in college?
I was going to be a math major and or French.
And then what happened?
Well, a couple of seasons of mono interfered with that, and I actually went to work for a Sears store and ended up working there for about 8 years, and then that moved into a job where I actually ran a medical laboratory.
All right.
About a mile from Loma Linda University. Very
cool, very cool. All right. So you went to Bakersfield in '86, and with your husband he had a job there, right? And did you have any kids at that time, or were you still?
Oh, I had four children.
4 children
at that point.
Moved there. Wow.
Yeah, and we took a job so that my husband could be a principal up in Delano, which is
cool.
about 40 miles north of us.
All right, very cool. So you have lived basically all your life in the Central Valley, right? Is Riverside considered the Central Valley still, or is that no longer?
No. That's the Inland Empire.
Right. Okay. Right. All right. But you've lived since '86 in Bakersfield in the Central Valley. So I have to ask you this: what do you think of the bullet train?
Personally, I think we need it, and so I am a proponent. My congressman and most of the other folks around will do nothing but bash it. But I think that we need to project and look to the future. Am I ever going to ride it? Likely not. Is it something that we need as infrastructure for our future? I do believe that. Do I like the way it's being financed? Not so much. Do I like the delays? Do I like the extraordinary cost and the CEQA issues that have delayed it? No. So what I'd like is to see that we find some path forward. When every other country can put a bullet train together in a few years, and ours has been underway for 20 years now?
Right.
There's something wrong with this process.
Right. Well, you use that magical 4-letter word, CEQA, right? I mean, it has to be a big part of the problem, I would imagine.
It is. And so now they're talking about abandoning it, and the good news is that all those stanchions that run up through Fresno are not in my backyard. They go up how many feet in the air because it's going to be an above ground line for a long time. And the property's been acquired. I mean, what are they going to do with those? Are they going to then demolish them, or are they going to just rust out? I don't know.
It reminds me of, I just came back from Peru. I was in Peru for 2.5 weeks over the holidays, and the first time I went to Peru, they actually had stanchions like that because they were building a train in Lima, and then the train, the whole economy exploded and fell apart, and for 20 or 30 years, those stanchions stood there, and then they just finished the line, like
Really?
3 years ago. They put it back together again. So I would hope that if the bullet train did run out of money, that they wouldn't demolish them, that they would do that, because that's one thing. We are so short-sighted in our culture, right? We think about next quarter, right, next year, right? I mean, the Chinese are thinking 100 or 200 years out, right, with their Belt and Road strategy that they're salting all of the world with right now. So I'm in favor of the bullet train too, because they call it the train to nowhere, I guess, but it's not. It's the train from San Francisco to LA that goes through the Central Valley, which is
ultimately, and of course that's where they've started it, which is why they're calling it the train to nowhere. I don't know that they really believe that Bakersfield is nowhere, but at some level in their minds it is, because it's not LA and it's not San Francisco. So they're starting in the middle and they will build it out.
Right. That's the easy part, and then the hard part is the end. But I mean,
Right.
As I understood it, Governor Brown wanted that because he sees the Central Valley as like the next place for population growth in California, right?
It's not the next place. It is the
It is
place.
the place right now. It's already happening. Right. Yeah.
I mean, I moved to Bakersfield in late '86. The population in the last 25, well, that's been 30 years. The population in the last 30 years has tripled.
Wow.
It's astonishing.
Right. It's mushrooming.
Yes.
Right. So it's forward thinking maybe to put the bullet train in now, because it's going to be more expensive 100 years from now.
But frankly, very few of my friends are
Right.
on board with that. So it just remains to be seen whether it'll withstand the political pressures or not.
Right. Well, there's a lot of pressure coming down the road, I think. So, so you said your dad was a realtor.
Yes.
Yes. And now was he an actual realtor, or was he just a real estate agent?
No, he was a realtor.
He was a realtor. Okay,
Absolutely.
very good. So, what made you decide to get into real estate? Was it your experience working with your dad, putting those MLS books together, or was there something else?
I'd always had a hankering to know more about real estate. So while I was running this medical laboratory, I would take my lunch hours and go study in my car and studied to take the test. Now, I didn't complete it at that point because I became the overall manager and life took a turn and things happen. But at least it fortified my thought process that this is something that I really did want to do. So when I moved to Bakersfield, I was pregnant and had no job. You don't walk into a company and say, "Well, I've just been running this laboratory, so I'm going to take your job." Yeah, they're not so happy to interview you.
Right.
Especially
right.
when you're expecting.
Right.
Because your brain freezes when you're expecting. You know that, right?
I've heard that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anyway.
I may have observed that, or not. And so that was it. The move to Bakersfield is what precipitated your search for a new career, and then you've
That's
been
right.
interested in real estate for a very long time. And you said you have 7 kids. Now I have 2 kids, and I can't imagine even having 3 kids really. And you have 7, and I don't get it. How can you do anything else? How can you become successful in real estate when you have 7 kids and a husband who also works outside the house?
It frankly depends on what your definition of success is. So in my second year of being in the business, someone suggested, my broker actually, suggested that, you ought to join a committee at the association. So I did. And within a couple of years, I was chairing that committee, and there's absolutely been no looking back because I feel like I have gotten so much more out of the organization than I have put into it. Now, did I make $1 bajillion in the first few years? No. I was on 2 school site councils. I was on, I was the room mother that went in not to provide goodies, but to read to the kids every week. And I was the one that would be on the school bus on the field trips because I was the only one that would discipline the kids. I'm just saying. So if my children are listening, yes, I'm sharing that. But so it's all a measure. I mean, I coached soccer for years. We had 7 kids in 6 different school sites one year. That was a nightmare. But I did that every day.
That's incredible. I mean, I have enough hard of a time getting both my kids to their sports on the weekends, right? I got 2 kids, and I can't imagine trying to get 7 kids
It was a nightmare.
to where they need to be, while at the same time, because weekends is when a lot of real estate business happens, right? So
I became very expert at changing out of shorts in my car into a skirt so that I could go show houses.
Right. Well, you must have this like amazing time management skills and the ability to compartmentalize. I mean, that's
part of it. But the other part of it is your expectations. So I really am maybe old-fashioned in that sense, but I never allowed my children to be the drivers of what was happening. And so, for instance, one year I made a concerted effort to change my kids into a magnet school. And so when I got the notice midsummer that they were going to be accepted in this particular school, how did I present it to my kids? I said, you know how lucky we are? Here's what you get to do, and here's what they get to do, and here's the school you get to do. Not, oh, honey, I'm so sorry, but you're going to be going to a different school next year. So the setup is, okay, your job is this. You go do this, you go do this. This is what I'm doing. Here we go. And we had dinner at home every night together. Now, it might have been egg burritos.
I love those.
But you know what I'm saying. It's how you set up your life expectations. So most of my kids are exactly like that, because you have to have a sense of where you want to be. And so did I show houses a lot at night? All summer long. But they were already home by that time. Right. You know, so it just whatever you want to do, it's how you set it up.
Right. Well, that's actually very interesting, because it's kind of contrary to what I see nowadays, which is that, you know, people put their kids first, and they say, what do you want to have for lunch? What do you want to have for dinner? Right? I mean, like there's, and I'll confess to doing some of that myself, right? You know, I mean, like I guess I indulge them too much, right? And
Well, I don't know that it's an indulgence, but you are giving them the opportunity to be the ones that call the shots.
Right.
So then when they get to be 15 and they're in high school and they're not able to call the shots because they've got other people over the top of them, how are they going to deal with that?
Right. Well, I do spend a lot of time telling them no. I do feel that's important, right? Because you're going to hear that a lot in life, and being able to deal with having, being told no is probably, pretty important in terms of how you handle that. So you said that you were just a year or two in the business when you started serving on a committee at your association, right? Yeah. So what committee was that? You remember what committee you started out with?
It was a long-range planning committee. And it was before we called, I think the California Association had just come out with a recommendation that every association needed to have a 7-year strategic plan of where they were going to go. So we literally sat down, strategized, decided what things we wanted to attack, and they were really tangible things. Like we wanted to have our own publication for a magazine so that we wouldn't have to put all our stuff in the local little magazines that cost an arm and a leg, which was a pittance compared to what we pay today. But so we did that in the first 2 years. Okay, check. And so we did that. The next year they asked me, who would you recommend to be chair next year? And I said, oh, don't I get to do it again? I was so naive, I had no idea that people didn't want to do it.
Right. Wow. A long-range planning committee, huh?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
We don't have one of those here. I don't think we have a strategic plan, but it's more of a.
But that is the genesis of it.
Right. That's how it began.
That's how it began.
Our strat plan goes out like 2 or 3 years, and I guess that's more like standard now. And I guess that's kind of smart because things are changing very quickly. Right. It's hard to plan 7 years out in the future now. And I also understand that you served on a lot of different task forces and committees at both the state and national level in the California Association of Realtors and the National Association of Realtors, and quite a few. And are there any committee assignments that really stick out in your mind as being particularly interesting?
Actually, yeah. I had the opportunity to chair the multiple listing committee at the national level, and that is absolutely mind-boggling to see how that operates, because there's hundreds of people in the room and on that committee. So that was very, very interesting. But as a part of that, they set up a committee that's, and I've lost in my head the name of the committee, but it's a committee that kind of previews and reviews some of the hard tasks that will be facing the MLS, and they vet it and talk about it and interview and just beat it to death. But then by the time it gets to the MLS, it's been pretty smoothed out. So then the job is literally to discuss at MLS what has come about from this other committee. So I got to chair that one and then the national MLS, and those were both very interesting.
How long were you on? Are you still on those committees, or how long did you serve in those committees?
No, they boot you off after a while.
They boot you off after a while,
yeah.
Right? Well, that seems to me like that's. I can see why you would say that's so interesting, right? Because the MLS is kind of like the lifeblood of our business in many ways, right? And it has been since you were putting those books together,
right?
Back when you were a little kid. So yeah, that's something I would like to be involved in one of those committees, maybe one day. So okay, so when did you decide that you wanted to be president of the California Association of Realtors, which is a huge thing? And now a lot of people who are listening to this aren't realtors. Most are not realtors. The California Association of Realtors, everybody, has over 200,000 members, right?
Right.
This is one of the largest trade associations in the country. Is it the second largest after NAR? Or, I mean, it's huge, right?
We are the biggest state association.
We're the biggest state association, right? So it's a large organization that you are stepping into the presidency of. So it's not it's not a small thing. It's a big thing. So when did you decide you wanted to take on that challenge?
I don't know that there was one moment that I would tell you. I've always been somebody that's been pretty extraordinarily involved. And the more you know, the more you want to know, because, well, wait, then how did that work? It just is part of how the puzzle puts together in your mind. But I remember discussing it a few years ago, and one of the people I mentioned it to stopped and looked at me and said, "Wow, Jeannie, I don't know that there's anybody that doesn't like you." And I thought, well, that was a weird thing to say, because it's not a popularity deal. On the other hand, if nobody likes you, you're not going to get elected.
Right.
But it's because of the participation. The people that I saw today at your installation and the people that I've known for years and years and years, it's reciprocal. I can respect what they do. They can equally respect what I do. And together, it makes the strength that we have. So to back up to your actual question, when did I decide? I actually had talked about it, but was prevented from running because Jared Martin was already running, and we are in the same region, and you cannot have two people from the same region running at the same time. So I had to back off, and honestly thought maybe time had passed and it was not to be. And then there was a change. Somebody that I knew that was going to be running changed their mind at the last minute, and so it opened the opportunity.
How long does it take to campaign or run to become president? Is it like a 3 or 4 year process? Because our Robert Bailey here, he's trying to become the president of NAR, and he wants
2024.
Yes,
just understand
5 years from now, right? So he's
Correct.
already campaigning. So how long does it take to?
Well, but you can't officially campaign.
Oh, he can't officially campaign.
You can start participating.
Like the primaries.
And exactly, you can start showing up. You can start being known, but you can't actively campaign, and you can't put together an actual campaign committee. So CAR is the same thing. It was like a 3-year process, and then you officially become a candidate, and we vote when we get to our May meetings, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, it's over. All this lead up and all the push and all the different things, and all of a sudden you're elected. So I was actually elected to this position in May of 2018. And because our state association is frankly smart enough to see that, okay, I'm coming in as president-elect, I've only got 6 months to get geared up. So from that day forward, day one, they included me on every email, every meeting, everything, just so that you're better prepared. Otherwise, you'd be lost.
Right. And then if Jared gets run over by a truck, you then become president.
That's
right?
correct.
Right. So
we're
we're
not going to talk about that.
That's not going to happen, of course. And if you got run over by a truck, you'd probably survive anyway. That guy is built like a truck. So you could like form like an exploratory committee, or like
you can form an exploratory committee, but you cannot officially campaign.
Right.
And so that exploratory committee was involved for about a year before you can officially start campaigning. So they're in it for a good 2-year slog.
Right. Wow. And how many people were you running against? I mean, I just remember you came around to our Region 10 meeting, right? And I don't think anybody else did. Was there more people running besides you, or they just didn't bother showing up, or?
No, I was unopposed.
You were unopposed,
but
right.
You still have to campaign.
You still have to campaign.
I
was also unopposed. To become a president, I'm saying like nobody wants this job, which I don't know why. It seems like a wonderful job, especially being the president of the California Association of Realtors. So were there any? I mean, you weren't opposed, but were there any obstacles that you had to overcome to become president-elect, aside from Jared Martin running?
Well,
at the
there
same
were
time
people that were talking about running. Clearly, I mean, there's never a vacuum where there's no one talking about it, and so the people that had been talking about it, other people went up to him and said, "Wait, you'll never win against Jeanne," And I'm not saying that egotistically. But when you've been a CAR director for over 20 years and you have participated and stepped up and done and chaired or vice chaired or whatever it is you've done, you have a better opportunity than somebody that's only been in the business for 6-7 years. Right.
I mean, from all the committees and task forces and whatnot, you must know a tremendous number of people at all levels of the state and national organizations. Does it really matter to the national organization? Not really, when you're running for a state.
Not in that sense, but anybody who's been a CAR director for any length of time knows how important it is to be able to work with the NAR folks. And so it does help to have, not in terms of getting elected in California, but it does help to have that support out there.
Right. Well, it's also just part of your network, right? I mean,
that's right.
I mean, if you know somebody at NAR, they can introduce you to somebody at CAR that you don't know.
Correct.
Right? Because
that's absolutely
CAR
correct.
is also just so huge. There's a lot of change in the real estate business. I'm not sure. We're here in the shadow of Silicon Valley. I assume that you feel it as well in Bakersfield. All this money that's coming into real estate to disrupt you hear that word a lot, disrupt our traditional business models. Do you have any thoughts about all this that's coming down the pike? Anything you can share with us?
Well, actually, I do. But I think we need to be the disruptors. Stop believing that it's status quo. Stop believing that it's just going to be like you did it yesterday, because it's not. And does that mean that I'm afraid of Zillow? No, I'm not afraid of Zillow. If I go interview with you to take your listing on your house, you're going to decide whether I bring enough value or whether you're going to do it yourself. Now, having said that, I will concede that I think that your area is more impacted by that just because of the tech sector, that you're going to see that sooner than I will in Bakersfield, in the lower Central Valley.
I actually would invite you to think that maybe it will be the reverse, because I think that the kind of properties that iBuyers like Zillow and company want to buy are tract houses, because they're very easy to define the value. We have almost no tract housing in Santa Cruz, right? So every house is custom almost, right? Whereas
right.
It's very easy to, like when I go to San Jose, and I want to do a CMA, comparative market analysis on a property, it's very easy to find comps. There's very similar houses, same age, same lot size, or cookie cutter, right? And so it's easy to establish the value, whereas here it's much more difficult. I think that we're going to be probably one of the last markets to get iBuyerized, right?
You might be right.
I think so. And they might be coming for you first, but I think we might hear about it more here first, because we are so close. But I think that a lot of the action is, there's Redfin in San Francisco, right? And there's but Zillow is in Seattle, but then there's Compass, right? So Compass is the opposite. Compass is essentially a traditional business model with a nice layer of technology on top, right?
Yeah.
And you mentioned something right then about making your value proposition to your clients versus whatever these other models that are coming down. And I love what you just said about we should become the disruptors, right? There's no reason why we can't be the disruptors. So how are you able to communicate your value proposition to your clients? Is there any? Cause that's one thing that I'm on. You ever see that Zen? You ever read that book Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance? Have you read that book?
No.
That guy went insane basically, and he was always looking to find quality, right? Like he was trying to he went on this epic quest to discover the meaning of quality, as I recall. And so my epic quest is how do we add value to a real estate transaction? Like how do realtors express that to their clients? How do you express the value that you bring?
You know, the interesting thing, and let me kind of put this into a story format, because this last week I just closed 2 transactions back to back. One was a client, they're in their mid-30s, and this was my 6th transaction with them. A couple of them were not happy when the market burst and all that kind of stuff, but this couple has stuck with me. I've been showing them horse properties, which is a 2.5 acre parcel, that they can bring the horses to, for about 2.5, 3 years. And it was just, every few months we'd go look at another one. Nah, it's not quite right. Well, we finally closed one last year. So their previous home, I put on the market. My son and his wife just bought that. So we put in the offer, but it was contingent on them selling theirs. And so we ran home and listed their home. So the fun part to me, and the reason I feel like this kind of answers your question, is these people know me well. My son's been around me all his life, but my son is an engineer, and he thinks like an engineer, and he thinks like an engineer. Just telling you. And so he would say, okay, so I have a question. And he prefaced it. He always said, okay, I have a question. What about this? Well, then what does this mean? And what it did for me was to tell me that we get too comfortable in what we do and how we do it. We know we're valuable. We know what we do to support our clients, but they don't necessarily know what we do because we don't articulate it. And my son took me full circle back to, he had some fairly basic questions, but because they had 2 transactions going at once, he was having a hard time sorting it in his mind. And but it was a real refreshing point of view to me. So I think the best thing we can do is to really take it down to the nuts and bolts. Even my client that I've done 6 transactions with, they never question what I'm telling them. No, it's, Jeannie, we trust you, so we know you're not going to sell us down the road. That's what your value is. Your value is in your trust, in your word, and in the fact that you get it done for them in a timely manner. And if it's something that's critical, you're going to say, okay, you're not going to like this, but here it is. And this is what we need to do.
Yeah, my favorite mortgage lender, he told me this, I think when I did a podcast with him a year ago or so. He said that this whole business is based on trust, right? Like,
absolutely.
If there's no trust, then nothing's going to happen. Like if I don't trust you to do your job, then we're not going to get anywhere. And I think that a lot of people are going to have trouble trusting, a bot or whatever to handle the sale of their house because they have no relationship with the bot, right? They can't trust the bot because they know the bot won't care at all.
Well, and previous client that was very happy working with me, and I've worked with her parents. She bought a house from me. Well, then her cousin got in the business, and so she called me and said, I'm sorry, but I really think I have to go with my cousin. I mean, and we're related. I have to give him a chance. Then she would come to my house and whine about every other week and tell me what he was not doing. And he was disrespectful of her. She was a young single, and he'd say, no, you're just going to do it because I told you to. What is his thought process that he thinks he's going to be in the business for another 20 years?
Right.
Maybe he doesn't care to be.
Right.
But he's not buying any long-term relationship. Trust me, if she buys another house, she's not going to be working with him.
Right.
I'm not related to her, but I'm telling you, so it does go back to the trust and to being respectful of your clients. Respect their time, respect that it's their money we're spending or helping them gain whatever side of the deal you're on. It's their money. This is impactful to them. And I think that I think that sometimes we lose sight of that. It's just for us, it's about getting the deal done.
I think that is true. A lot of realtors, that is ultimately what we're hired to do, is to get the deal done, right?
Understand.
Like, that's one of the things. But the fiduciary responsibility that you mentioned is that's something forefront in my mind every single second I'm working with anybody, right? Is making sure that I'm always looking out for their interests first. That's a critical thing. I don't know that an app is ever going to look out for your best interests.
Well, in this transaction that I just described, where I had this couple, and then my son brought in the offer, so I'm representing both sides of this deal. I told my son and his wife, I said, "Now you understand, I'm representing you as the buyer, but my duty is to the seller, and I'm never going to share with you information that the sellers are going to give me." And I went to my sellers, and I've done this with them before, and I said, "I need you to understand this." And I re-articulated that for them so that everybody was clear where the responsibilities were going to lie. I cannot favor my son over my client as the seller on that house.
Right, sure.
And so I brought it straight up to the front of the forehead so that they could understand where my position was. And every one of them respected me for it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I agree. I mean, I have not double-ended very many transactions at all, a small handful. But the small handful I did not have any trouble with it because I made sure everybody understood what my responsibilities and obligations were to every party. And dare I say, all those ones I did double-end, they all went smooth as silk.
Yeah, because you didn't have that agent on the other side you had to argue with.
Exactly.
I know. I'm being facetious a little bit, but it's true.
Right. So you were on the NAR MLS. Is that an MLS policy committee? Is that what the committee you were on? So what do you see in California's future as regards the MLS? Are we going to move into a one MLS state, or should we move to a one MLS state, or where do you see all this going?
Okay, well, you just asked the $1 million question.
That's the $1 million question.
So I'm going to give you my $1 million answer.
Oh, I love $1 million answers. All right.
The reality was I was one of the first directors for CalRed, if you remember back that far.
Yes, the precursor to CRMLS.
That is correct.
Which is the largest MLS in California right now with about 95,000 subscribers.
And so I was an early director, and I believe in the fact that we can and should do a statewide MLS. The reality is it'll probably be a little tough to put together, not just because of the demographics, but because of how we conduct business. For instance, Southern California has title and escrow separate. Northern California also has title and escrow separate. Central California, it's all in one place. And there are just slight differences in how we conduct business. It's all a little problematic, but it can be worked out. Just like you guys were talking about Pajaro Valley and Santa Cruz today. That was a smart move. The economies of scale are beneficial to everyone when you have someone that's able to do the multiples. I think that we need to be more consolidated, and frankly, so I don't really care if it's like there's one in Northern California, one in Southern California, and something else in between. But I really think there needs to be some serious consolidation. Some of the smaller associations and the smaller MLSs cannot possibly compete, therefore do not provide the same level of service to the members that the bigger ones do.
Yeah, I hear that. Gustavo Gonzalez, who is the president now of the Santa Clara County Association of Realtors, he has a vision for all of the Bay Area becoming one association of realtors, and that's pretty audacious goal, right? I mean,
it is.
But
it is achievable, but there have to be enough people that want it to happen. I mean, you can't be the lone voice out in the wilderness. It's like you asking everybody that was involved in that merger from your associations to stand up and be acknowledged. That's a tough deal. So doing the MLS merge is no less difficult.
Right.
But it's only territorial, meaning it's a mental territory.
Right.
Do I cross-sell in other areas? No, I don't. If I wanted to list something here, could I? Yes. The state of California has given me a license, so I could. Do I know all the issues involved in the Santa Cruz area? Oh, heck no. You guys have all kinds of weird rules and regulations that I'm not up to speed on, so I would be doing a disservice to my client.
Right.
Would it be wonderful to have this $1 million listing? Of course it would. Yeah, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to refer it to somebody in the area that has the expertise and the knowledge to do it. So my view is get over your thought process that you're going to run up and down the state. I do know there's people that do that. I don't respect that particularly. I think that we need to stay within the framework of what we know. I mean, 45 minutes from my house, I could be in Tehachapi. Have I sold homes in Tehachapi? I have. I do not want to. I refer to people there because they know about the marketplace. They know about the areas. If somebody says to you, well, I want to be in this area and this and this and this, you know where to take them. So that's a long answer, I guess. But I think that it's an arbitrary mental boundary that we have built up for ourselves. And if we want to compete with the iBuyers, we need to take down those barriers. And we need to make sure that we have as much information as they do.
Yeah, or more, right?
Right.
Or more, or much better information, right? Which I love. NAR, the RPR. I'm such a big fan of RPR. I can't even tell you, which is, that's national listing data, right?
Right.
It's national property records data.
Right.
What a tremendous tool that NAR has given us there. I'm a big favor of a single state MLS. I think it needs to happen. I understand there are different ways of doing business, but I used to be a computer guy. I used to do databases, and I understand that you can have extensible fields, right? So you can have subsets of data for different regions, and there are ways around these problems. California is undergoing a housing crisis. Do you guys feel there's a crisis in Bakersfield, or is that not a feeling? Is affordability pretty high in Bakersfield? People aren't worried about cost of housing, or?
We do have nice affordability, although only 50% of our people can afford to buy, because the cost of our housing is lower, but so is the average income.
Right.
So it's the same deal. It's only with fewer zeros behind it.
Right.
Right. So there is a housing affordability issue, and it just doesn't impact us in the same way that it does areas that won't allow building.
Right.
We have building going on. They're building like gangbusters in my area. The problem that we do have as a state is that even if you allow the builders to build, we have to stop hamstringing them by putting all the fees, the builder fees on top of them, all the things. And let me just give you a figure. I was working with a new construction builder in 2000, and the fees to get a new permit were about $7,500. Well, then there was some new construction that they were going to try and fund, so the fees were going to double. Well, everybody was up in arms about it. That was in 2000. Today, that $7,500 fee is about $41,000 per lot.
Whoa.
And we are cheap compared to the rest of the state. So if you take that difference, and now in 2020, every new construction home has to have solar included.
Right. Yes.
All right. So how much does that add to the cost of the home?
12,000, I don't know, something like that.
15,000, right? And the last time we had a major deal, we had to have overhead sprinklers, which I think is one of the dumbest things that has come around, and I've got some stronger opinions than that, but hey. So those two alone are going to add $30,000. No, not 30, $25,000 to the cost of a home. So add that to all the added costs on getting the permits. Now the builders can't afford to build entry-level homes. So you're seeing this discrepancy that you have to be a second or third time buyer in a lot of cases to get these nice new construction homes. And the entry-level folks are buying the older stock, the older housing stock. There's really intrinsically nothing wrong with that, except that you're not providing entry-level opportunity.
Right. Yeah, no, it's a huge problem. I really admire what CAR is doing with their Pathway to Home Ownership project. Are you familiar with that
cool?
At all?
Oh my gosh!
Which, if people are not familiar with that, is CAR, California Association of Realtors. They have a property in the heart of Los Angeles, and they're going to redevelop that parcel, their headquarters building, into a mixed-use property, and it's going to allow for their headquarters building as well as some affordable housing, and I believe they're also going to sell condos. Is that right? They're going to have they're going to sell some condos straight up, so it's going to be owner-occupied, affordable housing, and their headquarters all together. And they're calling that Pathway to Home Ownership, and they're doing that without any government money, right? They're providing affordable housing, with no subsidy.
And a component of that is also going to be required housing for veterans. For
veterans, yes, that's right. Very important. They do have a veteran component there as well. And now Governor Newsom is earmarking billions of dollars to spur housing development in California. And I'm wondering what you think that, like, local associations of realtors or just local realtors, just the public in general, what can we do to help create more housing in California, which we totally desperately need?
Well, let's take last year, for instance. Scott Wiener from the San Francisco area proposed a bill to allow for high-density housing near transit stops. Now, you and I might say, well, that's a no-brainer. In my area, we don't have transit stops. So that doesn't do anything to help my area. But in the Bay Area, you've got a lot of transit. And so what is wrong with that? But everybody just went bananas, and the measure failed. He had legislation going through, and it failed. So what can we do to push that kind of thing? I mean, to me, that was outside the box. The other thing that we also need to look at, we've got old commercial buildings sitting vacant. Now, your area, Silicon Valley, San Jose, you have less vacancy in those buildings because you've had the tech people come in and renovate and do whatever. But look at all over Southern California. There's old warehouses. What is wrong with rehabbing those and making them apartments? Making sure that there's transit that comes nearby. We need to do more with that kind of stuff. Old shopping centers. I mean, we need to look at it. I'm no genius. I mean, these are all ideas I've heard, and it's like my eyes start twinkling and I think, oh my gosh, that's a great idea. But we've got to get the voting public on board. It's just say yes. Stop saying no. Just say yes to more housing. Scott Wiener's going to reintroduce his bill, is my understanding, this year. There's absolutely no reason why that should fail.
I think the reason it failed because I think that 90% of San Francisco qualified for the definition of being within half a mile of a transit corridor, and that included all the wealthy, powerful neighborhoods, and that they would have been looking to have their, houses potentially being,
And that's the voting block.
Then that's the voting block. That's who runs the system, right? It's very interesting what they're doing now in Minneapolis. You hear about this? They eliminated single-family zoning in Minneapolis. It's gone. Doesn't exist.
Well, that's kind of scary.
Well, they did it because they wanted to allow more duplexes and triplexes. They're not going to allow residential towers, but they're going to basically allow all parcels that are right now with a single-family house to have duplexes and triplexes on them. That's out of the box, right?
Yeah, it is. No, I had not heard that one.
That is out of the box. Yeah, I heard that on the Gimme Shelter podcast. Have you heard about the Gimme Shelter podcast? Mm-hmm. It's by Matt Levin, I guess. I think he's with the LA Times, something like that. He's a housing reporter, and a very good podcast, actually. Yeah, and then CEQA, I guess, too, right? I mean, like, we really need to have that CEQA reform because that stops so many housing projects.
And do your listeners know what CEQA means?
California Environmental Quality Act, which was originally proposed, as I understand it, to protect supposedly poor, underserved or underrepresented communities from having oil refineries built in their neighborhoods. But the practical effect has been to stop high-density housing in wealthier neighborhoods, essentially.
Well, they use the Environmental Quality Act. I mean, we have multiple species in our area. The blunt-nosed lizard, I can't say it alliteratively, And we have the kit foxes, and we have, I mean, don't tell me the kit foxes are endangered. They probably are, but don't tell all the neighbors that they're all living in their backyards. You know, it's just, it's one of those things. We cannot overcompensate for some of the things that we did in the last century. And by that I mean in the early 50s, that's when they built the first supermarket. Okay, so they put this big box store and paved literally with cement the entire block around it, or all the way around it, and that was their parking lot. I mean, there were no trees, there was nothing aesthetic. Okay, so we now know that we don't want it to look like that. But don't continue to encumber us with rules to prevent things that happened in the 50s. We know that. You know, that's what your local control folks are supposed to be responsible for. We do not need state controls to tell you to do that. If we don't undo some of the CEQA restrictions, you'll never get anything built. It's insane. It allows people to block every single opportunity.
Yeah, that was one of the greatest things. You know, I've just started going to the CAR business meetings. I think I've been to 4 now, and that was one of my favorite sessions was about CEQA reform. There was a lawyer from Berkeley, and I'm from Berkeley, and so even before she said she was from Berkeley, just her patois, right? Her way of speaking. I was like, I really like this person. And she goes, I'm from Berkeley. I'm going like, right on. And she was all about, and Berkeley is actually a city which is all about CEQA, I'm sure, right? They love it. But she was not. She was a lawyer from Berkeley, and she was saying CEQA is a total disaster and needs to be basically scrapped or completely reformed because it is stopping so much needed development from happening. You know, our infrastructure in California, it's 60 or 70 years old for the most part, right? We really stopped building infrastructure and large-scale housing projects. Well, the large-scale housing kind of ended in the 80s, I guess, you know, but infrastructure certainly stopped well before that, right? And we're
paying for it.
And we're paying for it. In Santa Cruz County, we talk about people don't want to widen Highway 1, right? I mean, it's like that highway was built in the 60s. It's over 50 years. It's almost 70 years old, that highway, and it has not...
Only in the 60s, or was it before that?
It was built in the 60s. It was
really?
Built in the 60s. Yeah, before that, there was some kind of road, but you used to be able to go across the street. My own street that I live on used to go to the other side of the freeway, and they put the freeway in, and it doesn't go across there anymore. And that happened in the 60s. But since then, they haven't done anything to the highway hardly at all. They've done a little bit to it. But people are so against widening the highway. It's just amazing, right? They'd rather have us sit around and, you know, pollute the atmosphere with our idling cars, right? Which is very bad for the environment, may I just say. Okay. Let me ask you about CAR's Woman Up initiative. Can you tell me about Woman Up? Do you know much about Woman Up?
I have gone to both of the Woman Up meetings that have been held. We had our second one this last June, I believe. And the idea of Woman Up is not to put men down, but it's to highlight and empower women where more than 50% of our membership is female.
Right.
But less than 25% females are owners. And so what is it about that? Are we inadvertently stifling women? Are we not allowing them the same opportunities? Part of it is built-in bias that we grew up with. You know, I mean, we've heard the term, act like boys, don't be a girl. You know, I mean, they're joking terms, but at their essence, they are discriminatory, right?
Right. So
the success of this has been so huge and has hit such a nerve. I mean, I found myself thinking about it. When I went to the first one, I found myself thinking about those speakers for weeks afterwards. I'm not a shy wallflower kind of person. And listening to Evelyn Arnold from Los Angeles, Evelyn's son was a president of the California Association several years ago. She is a woman of color. And Evelyn, way back in the early 60s, had bought a couple of properties. Well, she was a hairdresser. And so she decided she wanted to start selling real estate. She studied, got her license, went back to the office that she had bought her properties through, and they told her, oh, we don't hire people like you. So Evelyn thought, fine, I'll just go start my own office, which she did. She got her broker's license, started her own office. But it's going back, and I understand that a lot of the folks that are listening in are not old enough to remember that, but it's going back to those folks and looking at them. They're trailblazers. They started a wave of women, but it's been 50 years. We need to be over it. We need to stop. Right?
Right.
We need to allow women, if it looks different, is different, okay. Does that make it wrong? Does that make it bad? Maybe the women have something different to contribute. It's been very, very impactful as far as I can see. They're now taking it nationwide because it's the first year we had like 150 people in attendance. Last year it was more than double that, and they were sold out well in advance. They've got national speakers that come in. There is not one thing that is bashing to men. That is not the point. It's how can we help you gain the confidence to be better than you are, or to take that step, take that plunge, go be CAR president-elect.
Yeah, because I was just looking at the Swanepoel 200 list, right? And
I haven't seen it yet.
It's almost exclusively white males, right?
Yeah.
And like almost exclusively, I would say 90%. If I had to guess. I mean, like, and it's strange because in our industry, the average realtor is a 52-year-old woman, I guess, right?
That's right.
I mean, like I think that's the average profile, and women make great realtors. There's no reason why they shouldn't also be great broker owners too.
Right.
Right. And great leaders in the CAR, right? Like yourself, for example, right?
It isn't intended to exclude anybody. Again, I mean, I know I've said this the third time, but I just need people to understand. Just because it's saying woman up, it just means we want to provide you with the tools and the information you need. Make sure we're not inadvertently excluding you.
Right. Yeah. It's not man down. It's woman up. And then
Right.
there's also the Women's Council of Realtors. Are you involved with them at all, or?
No, I'm not. I've kind of hovered around the edges for a number of years, but I haven't actually been one of their members for a while.
I hear great things about them. A lot of guys around here too. A lot of men are on the
Yeah.
Women's Council. I think the president of the Women's Council of Realtors right now is actually a man. So it's not exclusionary at all, right? But it's just helping female realtors be better business people, right? And
That's
nothing
right.
wrong with that, right? What advice can you offer to people who aspire to like a leadership position in a local association or at CAR or whatever organization that they're a part of, like I don't know, the American Bar Association or Teachers Union or whatever? What advice do you have for people who want to get involved?
Number one, volunteer. Offer your services. You will learn more than you can possibly imagine. And the more you know, the more you know. And the more you know, the better you are. And the better you are, the more people take notice. I mean, it's a fall forward kind of a thing. And I just think that the more you become involved, the more you understand the power that you have and the power that you need to use for a positive good. I don't know that I can tell you any better than that.
Right. Get involved. Just start, right?
Just start.
And we have that problem here at the Santa Cruz County Association of Realtors is getting people involved, right? I mean, there's so many people who just... And to me, it's been like incredibly rewarding, right? Like, well, we heard it today in my installation, right? Where people were, Sandy Kaplan was talking about that, right? Do you know Sandy Kaplan?
Yeah.
You must, right?
Yeah.
She's famous, right? So,
She is.
She is. Just it's so rewarding to just get involved. Like it's not only good for you, it's good for everybody, right? Just get involved and volunteer and just start that way. Start with a very simple thing. I started on the local government relations committee. That's how I got my start to where I am today. And I love LGR. I'm still on LGR, and
Right.
that's my go-to committee. Right? That's
right.
That's where I feel at home. So we got to wrap things up. I know you got places to go, but before we do, is there anything that I didn't ask you that I should have asked you?
No, you've been pretty good. You've covered the bases pretty well. Let me just tell you, I am a practicing realtor. I go out and I show homes. I take listings. I load my own listings into the MLS because oftentimes it's after hours or before hours, and it's just part of the service that I provide to my clients. But I also have started using a professional photographer. I make the appointment, I show up for the appointment, and then let them do their job, and then he sends me the photos, and they're so superior to what I was taking. Again, that's part of the service. I don't charge my clients. That's part of what I do. But I'm a practicing realtor, and I think that keeps me grounded as to what we need to do to keep our members in place.
Yeah, I hear that, and I'm also a big, huge proponent of professional photography. I mean, that's like the best money you can spend almost on a listing, it seems to me. And keeping in the practice, I think, is really important. I think that like politicians or whatever, right? I mean, they get to Congress or the Senate, right, and then they just leave the real world behind, right? And
they forget what it's like.
They forget what it's like
to go to the grocery store,
right? So I thank you and you're going to keep on working as a realtor, right? I mean, you're not going to take a year off, are you, or 2 years off?
No, don't think that'll work.
Right? Yeah, exactly. It's still got the bills to pay. How young is your youngest kid? Are they all out of the house now, or
they are now all out of the house? My youngest one is 26.
Okay, all right. And so none of them are living with you. They all launched.
They've all launched.
They've all launched. Good. All right, very good.
That's a good thing.
Excellent. Are they all in Bakersfield, or are they? I
have one that's in Sparks, Nevada, and then my youngest one has just moved to Oxnard. He was a Marine for 5 years, served overseas, and when he came back, he did a couple of different things, went to school, but now he's working for a private security firm for people that we're not supposed to know who they are.
Right.
It's private security.
Right, private security. I like that. You're going to need some of that too as president.
Not likely.
All right. Thank you so much, Jeanne. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you maybe in Indian Wells here in a couple of weeks. All right. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
All right. All right, that wraps up episode number 36 of the Bay to Bay podcast. I really hope you enjoyed listening to my conversation with Jeanne Radsick, and I do wish her the best of luck in 2020 and in 2019 as well. She is part of the CAR, that's the California Association of Realtors leadership team here in 2019, and she'll be very busy with that as they groom her to take the reins, as it were, in 2020. So best of luck to you, Jeanne, in your future endeavors, and I look forward to seeing you around at various business meetings in the year and years, I guess, to come. All right, and as always, this episode of the Bay to Bay podcast is sponsored by thesoldbook.com. That's right, go to thesoldbook.com, where you can order a free copy of my book, Get It Sold. Get It Sold is all about how you can quickly and easily sell your home for the very highest price possible and have a good time doing it. And check this out. If you use the coupon code FREESHIP, that's FREESHIP, all one word, at checkout, I'll even ship it to you for free. Now, this book is sold on Amazon.com for $13 a copy, but you can get it for free at thesoldbook.com. All right, thank you so much again for listening to the Bay to Bay podcast. Oh, do me a favor, could you give us a like and a review on iTunes and share this with all your friends and neighbors? I sure would appreciate it. Okay, thanks so much, and I'll have another episode of the Bay to Bay podcast up before you know it.